Good morning everyone, welcome to Bioworld. Today's topic is control and coordination. We make many body movements. The movements of our hands, legs, jaws. All these movements are under the control of our will or consciousness. But other movements like heartbeat, respiratory movements during inhalation and exhalation, that is the movement of ribs and diaphragm, all these movements are not under the control of our consciousness. In order to perform a skill or any work for that matter, our body should perform in a coordinated way. This coordination is done by nervous system and endocrine system. Nervous system consists of brain, spinal cord, nerves, sense organs, etc. Nervous system is an organ system which is responsible for sending messages from brain and spinal cord to all parts of the body and again back to brain. Next is endocrine system. Endocrine system has many endocrine glands. Endocrine glands are otherwise called ductless glands. Why they are called ductless glands? Because they do not have ducts to empty their content into the bloodstream. Instead, they empty their contents directly into the bloodstream. The secretions of these ductless glands are called hormones. These hormones control many bodily functions such as reproduction, hunger, and much complicated functions like emotions and behavior. Now, let us see both these systems in detail. First of all, the nervous system. Nervous system is composed of millions of structural and functional units called neurons. Let us see the structure and function of a neuron in detail. This is a neuron. Neuron is the structural and functional unit of nervous system. This neuron is a highly specialized structure which is responsible for transmission of nerve impulses. This neuron consists of many parts. Which are the parts? Let us see that. This star-shaped structure is the cell body. You can see a nucleus inside. This cell body is otherwise called cytosol. Cell body continues down as a cylindrical structure. This cylindrical structure is called axon. This axon ends at the axon terminal. These are hair-like structures at its end. These hair-like axon terminals has knobs at its end. These knobs are called synaptic knob. Let us see once again the structures. This cell body is a star-shaped structure with many hair-like structures protruding out of its margin. You can see hair-like structures here. These structures are called dendrites. What is the function of these dendrites? Dendrites receive the nerve impulses from the receptors located at the sense organs and pass it over to the axon. This axon has a protective sheath here. That sheath is called myelin sheath. This myelin sheath is made up of Schwann cells. What is the function of this myelin sheath? This myelin sheath acts as an insulator cover for the axon. And axon relay nerve impulses through this axon terminal. These are the structure of a neuron. Now, let us see different types of neuron based on the function. Based on their function, there are three types of neurons. They are sensory neurons, interneuron or association neuron, and the motor neuron. Let us see what are the functions. This sensory neuron, receives signals or nerve impulses from the sense organs. Sense organs have many receptors on them. So, the sensory neuron receives impulses from these receptors and pass it over to the interneuron or association neuron. So, what is the function of this association neuron? They relay the impulses between the sensory neuron and this motor neuron. The third one is motor neuron. What is the function of these motor neurons? These neurons send signals to the muscles or to the glands. Look here, this picture shows the transmission of nerve impulses. Nerve impulses travel in this manner from one neuron to the next. Here, the first neuron, we can call it as a presynaptic neuron because it is just in front of the synapse. And this neuron, we can call it as a postsynaptic neuron. Dendrites of this presynaptic neuron receives signals from the sense organ and pass it over to the axon, and it reaches the axon terminal. These axon terminals are connected to the dendrites of the postsynaptic neuron so that the impulses pass into the dendrite of the next neuron and then into the cell body, and through the axon it passes into the adjacent neuron. In this way, nerve impulses pass in a linear manner from one neuron to the next. We have seen that sensory neurons receive impulses from the receptors present on our sense organs. Here in this picture, you can see our five sense organs. They are tongue, skin, eyes, ears, and nose. How can we define a receptor? Receptors are the specialized tips of nerve fibers. They collect the information from the environment. So, in these sense organs, we can see many different types of receptors. In the skin, we have the receptors for touch, pressure, temperature, pain, etc. And in the eyes, we have receptors for vision and light. And in the ears, we have receptors for sound and balance. And in the nose, we have receptors for smell, and on our tongue we have gustatory receptors or the receptors for taste. We have seen that our nervous system is composed of millions of neurons. The human nervous system can be divided into three, which are the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and autonomous nervous system. Central nervous system composed of brain and spinal cord. Brain and spinal cord. Here you can see the brain and spinal cord. Next, peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system is composed of cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Cranial nerves are the nerves emerge from the brain. These are called cranial nerves. There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. So, peripheral nervous system is composed of cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Spinal nerves are the nerves emerge from the spinal cord. There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves and 12 pairs of cranial nerves. And third one is autonomous nervous system. This autonomous nervous system is composed of a chain of nerve ganglion. A chain of nerve ganglion. They run along the spinal cord. Autonomous nervous system controls all the involuntary activities in our body like heartbeat, respiratory movements, etc. Look at this picture. If you observe closely, you will get an overall picture of nervous system. Here you can see the brain at the anterior end of the body in the head region, and you can see a cylindrical structure here, that is spinal cord. This brain and spinal cord together constitute the central nervous system. And here at the base of the brain you can see cranial nerves on both the sides. These are called cranial nerves. And on either side of the spinal cord you can see the spinal nerves, and these nerves emerge from the spine. Cranial nerves emerge from the brain. Cranial nerves and spinal nerve together constitute the peripheral nervous system. And then you can see a chain of ganglia along the spinal cord. It forms the autonomous nervous system. Now, let us see in detail each and every part of nervous system. Now, let us see the structure and function of brain. Brain is the main coordinating center of the body. If you observe the figure very closely, you can see that cerebrum is the biggest part of the brain. They have lot of foldings and convulsions and fissures. What is fissures? Deep foldings are called fissures. In order to accommodate maximum number of neurons, they are highly folded so that they can accommodate many number of neurons and that increase its efficiency. And here, just below the cerebrum, you can see thalamus and hypothalamus. And here, at the base of the cerebrum, at the back side, you can see the cerebellum. Cerebellum is also folded structure, but the foldings are lesser here when compared to cerebrum. And here, this region you can see pons and medulla oblongata. Midbrain is the connecting link between the anterior part of the brain and posterior part of the brain. This midbrain, pons and medulla oblongata together form the brain stem. Medulla oblongata continues down as spinal cord. So these are the parts of brain. Now let us see the functions of different parts of the brain. Here, first of all, we will see the functions of cerebrum. Cerebrum controls the thinking process and the voluntary actions. It also stores information and helps in the process of learning. Here in the region of cerebrum, we can see many control centers. Control centers for pressure, that is for touch, taste, hearing, vision, and for smell, speech, problem solving, and for motor movements. These are the control centers in the region of cerebrum. All these actions or processes are under the control of cerebrum. Just below the cerebrum, we can see thalamus and hypothalamus. What is the function of this thalamus? Thalamus receives sensory impulses from various parts of the body, like all our sense organs, and integrate these impulses. Then just below that we can see hypothalamus. This hypothalamus controls our sleep and wake cycle of the body. That cycle is called circadian rhythm. It also controls the urges to drinking and eating. Then just below that you can see the cerebrum and the brainstem. Brainstem is made up of pons and medulla oblongata. This cerebellum coordinates the motor functions. It controls our posture and balance. For example, when you are riding a bicycle, we need a perfect coordination between our pedaling and the steering control. This is done by cerebellum so that it controls the precision of voluntary actions. Then, next part, the brainstem contains medulla oblongata and pons. What is the function of this medulla oblongata? Medulla oblongata control various involuntary actions like heartbeat, respiration, blood pressure, salivation, vomiting, etc. And then pons relay impulses between the lower cerebellum and spinal cord. Pon is this region, so it relay impulses between the cerebellum and spinal cord. These are the functions of different parts of brain. Now let us see the structure and functions of spinal cord. Here in this picture, you can see the brainstem continues down as a cylindrical structure. This cylindrical structure is called spinal cord. The spinal cord has many spinal nerves. On either side of the spinal cord, you can see the spinal nerves. These spinal nerves actually connect brain with peripheral parts of the body. So, the spinal cord is the connecting link between brain and other peripheral organs of our body. Then, what are the other functions? It also controls the reflex action. What is a reflex action? It is a special case of involuntary movement. Involuntary means that happens without our will. For example, when our hand touches a hot object, we move away our hand in a jerk. It happens in a flash. And in other example, like when we accidentally look at a bright light, we blink our eyes instantaneously. All these actions are sudden reactions of our body. These sudden reactions are called reflex actions. Here, we don't think much. By the time we think, our hand is already removed. So, our brain is not involved in this process. Due to our sudden action, our hand is saved from the imminent injury here, and in the second case, our eyes are saved from the damage. This reflex action is under the control of our spinal cord. Now, let us see reflex action in detail. This picture explains the process of reflex action. Here you can see the passage of nerve impulse. This red colored part indicates the passage of nerve impulse. It starts at the receptors. Here, the receptors. What are receptors? Receptors are nerve endings located on our sense organ. Here, which is the sense organ involved? Our skin. Skin has many receptors like receptors for pain, touch, pressure, etc. These receptors get activated when they are in touch with a hot object. At that time, what happens? The sensory neuron here picks signal from the receptors and pass it over to the relay neuron. The relay neuron is located in the spinal cord. This black colored part is the cross section of spinal cord. So, here you can see the relay neuron that is located inside the spinal cord. Spinal cord sends signal to the muscle. Here you can see the muscle. Muscle is the effector organ here. What message spinal cord gives? Pull the hand as early as possible. Then what happens? Muscles comes in action, pulls the hand back and moves the hand away from danger. Here, signals involved in reflex action do not travel up to the brain. It travels up to the spinal cord. Sending signal to the brain would involve more time. Here you can see that reflex action is controlled at the level of spinal cord. That is all about reflex action. You should remember one more important point under this heading, that is reflex arc. How can we define reflex arc? It is the pathway of nerve impulse. The pathway, that is the flow of signal. Here the flow of signal starts from the receptors and then to the sensory neuron, and from the sensory neuron to relay neuron here, and from the relay neuron to the motor neuron, and at last the message reaches the effector region, that is muscle in the arm. So this path of signal is called reflex arc.
Both brain and spinal cord, they are very delicate organs. They need to be well protected. In order to protect these delicate organs, we have many protective structures. Like, first of all, the bony protection for brain is called skull. Skull is otherwise called cranium. The bony protection of the spinal cord is vertebral column. Just inside the skull, we can see a membrane. That membrane is called meninges. Meninges is a three-layered membrane. That membrane is filled with a fluid. That fluid is called cerebrospinal fluid. All these protective structures protect brain and spinal cord from shock and other external injuries. Now, let us see these protective structures in detail.
First of all, the skull. Skull is made up of 8 bones. They are attached each other by bony sutures. You can see bony sutures in between the bones. All these bones are immovable except one, that is lower jaw. Lower jaw is a movable bone out of all these 8 bones. Skull is also called cranium. The cranial nerves got its name from the term cranium. Here in this picture, you can see the bony protection of both the brain and spinal cord. Bony protection of brain is skull and bony protection of the spinal cord is vertebral column. In this way, the skull is connected to the vertebral column. Vertebral column is a long cylindrical structure. It is made up of many vertebrae. The vertebrae located in the cervical region or just below the cranium or just below the skull, they are called cervical vertebrae. And then vertebrae in the thoracic region are called thoracic vertebrae, and those in the lumbar region, lumbar vertebrae, and those vertebrae at the posterior end, they are called sacral vertebrae. Next is membranous protection. Here you can clearly see that first layer of the head is scalp. Scalp is the outermost coating on which our hair is fixed. Just below the scalp you can see the bony coat, that is skull. Just below the skull we can see a three-layered structure. This three-layered structure is called the meninges. Meninges has many layers like dura mater, arachnoid mater, and then pia mater. Just below here, this structure, this reddish part represents the cerebral cortex, that is part of the brain. These are the protective layers of brain. Next is the fluid protection. Fluid protection is provided by the cerebrospinal fluid. This fluid is filled within the inner membranes of the meninges. Here you can see the blue colored part that represents the inner layers of meninges. There you can see CSF. And again, inside the ventricles of the brain. What are ventricles? Ventricles are chambers inside the brain. Here you can see 4 such ventricles. Right ventricle, left ventricle, third ventricle, and fourth ventricle. Then next, what is the function of this CSF? That is very important. That can be asked as 2-mark question. Then here, what are the functions? It provides nutrients and oxygen to the brain tissue because brain tissues are immersed in this CSF, and it also regulates the pressure inside the brain. And the third point is that it protects the brain from injuries and other external shocks. Next is peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system is composed of cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Here in this picture you can see 12 pairs of cranial nerves. These cranial nerves come out of the brain and go to the organs in the head region. You can see here this side and this side you can see 12 pairs of cranial nerves. Look at this picture. Here you can see the spinal nerves on either side of the spinal cord. How many pairs are there? There are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. These spinal nerves come out of the spinal cord and go to the organs which are below the head region. Here in the head region we can see cranial nerves, and below the head region we can see the spinal nerves. What is the function of these nerves? These nerves carry information to and from the central nervous system. Central nervous system is brain and spinal cord. So, what is the function of these veins? These veins carry information to and from the central nervous system. Next is autonomous nervous system. This autonomous nervous system is the part of the peripheral nervous system. Autonomous nervous system regulates the function of our internal organs such as heart, stomach and intestines. This autonomous nervous system controls some of the muscles within the body like pericardial muscles, muscles on the wall of the stomach and intestine, etc. This autonomous nervous system again can be divided into two. They are sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. We will see these nervous system in detail. Autonomous nervous system as a whole controls the activity of an organ as per our need. Here you can see sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system. And for example, during running, there is an increased demand of oxygen by the body. This is fulfilled by an increased breathing rate and increased heart rate. This is done by sympathetic nervous system. Here you can see the sympathetic nervous system along the spinal cord. There are many ganglia. It is a chain of ganglia. This chain of ganglia forms the sympathetic nervous system. And what is the function of parasympathetic nervous system? Here you can see a chain of 4 ganglia in black color. These chain of ganglia form the parasympathetic nervous system. What is the function of parasympathetic nervous system? Parasympathetic nervous system slows down the activity of an organ. During sleep, the breathing rate slows down and so does the heart rate. This is facilitated by the parasympathetic nervous system, and as a result, it helps in the conservation of energy. If you look at this picture closely, you can see the functions here. The functions of sympathetic nervous system is just opposite of the functions of parasympathetic nervous system. For example, you see this sympathetic nervous system helps to dilate pupil of your eye, and at the same time parasympathetic nervous system constricts the pupil of the eye. Here it inhibits salivation, here it stimulates salivation. Here it relaxes bronchi, here it constricts bronchi. Like that, you can see that the function of sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system are just opposite. Okay, this is all about the central nervous system, peripheral nervous system and autonomous nervous system.
When we look at our nervous system, we can see three types of responses, which are the voluntary responses or voluntary actions like walking, running, etc. It is controlled mostly by cerebrum, the region of forebrain. And then next one, involuntary actions like heartbeat, respiratory movements, muscles of our internal organs. All these are under the control of medulla oblongata, the part of hindbrain. And the third type of response is reflex action. This reflex action is under the control of spinal cord. This is all about our nervous system. Hope it is clear for everyone. Bye till we meet with the next video.